All right, let's dive into the most critical few seconds of any flight, the landing flare. This is that make or break moment, you know? It's what separates a truly perfect touchdown from, well, a potential disaster. When you think about it, every landing really has two possible outcomes. It's either going to be a butter landing, the kind that's so smooth you barely even feel it, or it becomes a YouTube sensation, which is, let's be honest, just as bad as it sounds. The stakes are incredibly high. So what's the difference? What separates that silky smooth landing from a disastrous, bumpy one? It all comes down to the gap between precise, honed technique and just a tiny, split-second miscalculation. And the key to that technique, the secret ingredient, it's all about the landing flare. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about what the flare actually is. Then we're going to break down the anatomy of a perfect one second by second. After that, we'll look at what happens when landings go wrong, which is always illuminating. And finally, we'll wrap up with the key steps to really master the touchdown. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is the flare? Well, it's that final, absolutely crucial move that takes a plane from descending through the air to actually being on the runway. The textbook definition says it's the maneuver where a pilot raises the nose just before touchdown. But what does that really mean? It means you're slowing that downward motion, bleeding off vertical speed, so you can gently kiss the runway with the main wheels first, instead of just slamming into it. Now, the flare is universal, for sure, but it is not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Think about it. In a little Cessna, the pilot's sitting just maybe 4 feet off the ground. They'll start their flare at about 10 feet. But in a massive Boeing 747, the pilot's eyes are already 25 feet high when the plane is on the ground. So they have to start that flare way earlier, around 30 feet, to get those main wheels down gently. So how's it actually done? Let's get into the nitty-gritty. We're going to break down the anatomy of a perfect flare. And we'll use a Boeing 747 for our example. This is where the magic happens. So picture this. You're in the cockpit of a 300-ton queen of the skies on approach into Seattle. You're all set up, flaps at 30, your target speed is 154 knots, and you're coming down at a nice, stable 800 feet per minute. Everything is perfectly in the pocket. Then, the radio altimeter calls it out. 50. Okay, this is what they call the absolute attention alert. You've got just about 1.4 seconds until it's go time. Right now, your focus completely shifts from the instruments, and your eyes go to the far end of the runway. You're judging your pitch, the angle of the nose against the horizon. 40. The runway lights are getting brighter, bigger, the painted lines are just rushing towards you. You're still coming down at 13 feet every single second. But you hold, you wait, you're looking for that perfect moment. And there it is, 30. This is it. This is the trigger. That 30-foot callout, by the way, is based on the height of the main landing gear, not you in the cockpit. It's the signal. Time to initiate the flare and start flying the airplane right onto the runway. And a whole lot happens all at once. It's like a dance. The pilot gently pulls back on the yoke, raising the nose just 2 or 3 degrees. That's it. At the exact same moment, they smoothly pull the throttles all the way back to idle. Then, the trickiest part, they firmly hold that new nose-up attitude and just wait for the aircraft to settle itself onto the runway. And this, right here, this is where the real skill comes in. See, as those engines spool down, the plane's natural tendency is to drop its nose. The pilot's job is to fight that, to prevent it from happening, holding that pitch steady for a gentle touchdown. You're actively flying this thing all the way to the ground. And get this whole incredibly intense, high-stakes maneuver, it's over in just 4 to 8 seconds. It all happens over about 1,000 to 2,000 feet of runway. But in that tiny window of time and space, that's where a great landing is made. Or a terrible one. Of course, things don't always go according to plan. And honestly, to really master a technique, you've got to understand the common mistakes, right? So let's analyze 3 common flare mishaps and see what we can learn. First up is the most dramatic one, the no flare landing. And yeah, it is exactly what it sounds like. The pilot just doesn't flare the plane. The cause is pretty simple. The pilot never pulls back, never raises the nose to break that 800 foot per minute descent. And the effects, it's brutal. The plane just slams into the runway with all that energy, leading to a bone-jarring impact and usually a big bounce back into the air. Not good. Okay, next we have a much more common mistake, the late flare. This is when the pilot does the right thing, but they just do it at the wrong time. So if you start that flare at, say, 20 feet instead of 30, the plane just doesn't have enough room or time to slow down its descent. The result is you end up planting the aircraft firmly on the runway. It's not a crash, but it is definitely not a smooth landing. Your passengers will feel it. And finally, we have the complete opposite problem, the long flare, which pilots often call floating. This happens when you get a little too aggressive. This is when the pilot pulls back too early, or maybe a bit too hard, and they completely stop the descent. The plane levels off, and because of this cushion of air between the wings and the runway, it's called ground effect, it just floats and floats and floats, eating up precious runway. This gets really dangerous because you can easily miss your touchdown zone and find yourself running out of pavement. So, after seeing the right way and a few of the wrong ways, how do we put this all together? Let's boil it all down to the key takeaways for mastering that perfect landing flare. All right, here's your cheat sheet for the perfect flare. Number 1, be stable and configured by 1,000 feet. At 50 feet, get your eyes up and look to the far end of the runway. At 30 feet, it's go time. Pitch up just those 2 to 3 degrees, and at the same time, pull the throttles to idle. And then, the most important part, just hold that pitch. Hold it firmly and let the airplane land itself. You know, from butter landings to greasers, pilots and passengers have all kinds of expressions for landings, both good and bad. So I've got to ask you, what are some of the names you've heard or that you use for a really soft or a really hard landing? I'm curious to know. Thanks for tuning in.